In February 2017, I was the victim of an attempted burglary and home invasion. A lot of the information I'm including in this story was discovered after the incident, so it is very descriptive and detailed. I live alone in a 3-bedroom house in the suburbs of Northeast Austin. I usually go to bed around 9 p.m., but this particular night was different because I had been out till 1 a.m. with friends, so I went to bed much later than usual. Once I went to sleep, all the lights of the house were off, and my truck was parked in my garage. Around 3:30 a.m. Sunday morning, my neighbor's elderly mother, who lives 3 houses down across the street, heard someone knocking on her door. She saw them through a window, but she didn't answer the door. She woke her son and another man living there, who initially assumed that someone wanted to steal the expensive tools from their trucks. The 2 men decided to take a walk around the neighborhood. Around this time, 3 people came to my property, entered the backyard, and looked around for signs that someone was home. They went back to the front of my house and kicked the front door in. I was sound asleep around 4:30 a.m. when I woke up to the sound of a loud bang. Right away, I assumed a drunk driver just drove a car into my house. About a month before this, 3 intoxicated teenagers drove their parents' car into one of my neighbor's trees at about 50 miles per hour, so my initial assumption was that there was a car crash. I slowly stood up, turned on my bedroom light, grabbed a pistol that I kept next to my bed, and groggily went downstairs expecting to see someone that drove into my house. I heard voices speaking Spanish, and it sounded like they were outside my house in the driveway. 2 people had kicked in my front door. One of the people entering my house had long black hair. One was staying outside to watch for trouble. They started moving through the house, turning on all the lights as they went. As soon as I left the master bedroom, I noticed the light on in my guest bedroom and the door opened. I remember thinking how it was weird, since I didn't recall turning on the lights in that room. I walked past the L-shaped hallway and noticed the door was open and the light was on in the next bedroom, which was a room I never used. I walked forward into my loft, at which point I could see the front door was wide open. I didn't notice at the time, but part of the door frame was on the floor, and the door handle had smashed through the drywall when it was kicked open. I went back to the master bedroom, left the door open, and called 911. I went next to the window, as that gave me a straight view out of the master bedroom and down the hall. I figured if someone came down the hall, they'd have to cover about 25 feet to get me, which would give me enough time to shoot them. My neighbors saw my short-statured silhouette through the window talking on the phone. They called 911 and reported it as domestic violence. They saw that the front door was open and all the lights were on. Looking out my window, I saw 2 guys who looked to be in their mid-20s walking down the street. One was wearing pajama pants and no shirt. The other was in a wife beater and boxers. I gave their description to the 911 operator. Exactly 8 minutes after I called 911, 2 cars from the Austin Police Department parked in front of my house. The operator told me to put my gun down since the police were there. I put it in my bedside safe but left it unlocked. 2 officers got out and ran down the street away from my house. I heard yelling and saw them running as I looked out the window. It turns out the police saw my neighbors walking around and chased them down to talk. After another 4 minutes, the police yelled into the house from the front door. I told them that I was the homeowner and that I was in the 2nd floor master bedroom. They told me to wait. I put my gun down on the nightstand and realized that the 911 operator had hung up on me. I put my hands up, not wanting to accidentally get shot by a cop. The police cleared the house with guns drawn. When I saw the first officer, I told him that I was the homeowner. He proceeded to clear the 2 rooms between us, which were the guest bedroom and the master bathroom. He didn't seem concerned about me at the time. Once in the master bedroom, 1 cop asked for my name while the other was somewhere else in the house. The cop in the master bedroom was standing very close to me, between me and the door. He asked for my ID, and then handed me my wallet after I told him where it was. I provided my ID, and he wrote the information down on a tiny notebook. The cops then asked me to walk through the house with them and see if anything was missing. After searching, I said that nothing was missing. They asked about my girlfriend over and over repeatedly, which was quite perplexing to me because I had been single for years. At this time, I didn't know that the neighbors had called 911 and reported it as domestic violence. The cops sat me down in my kitchen, then gave me permission to put on a shirt. I talked with both officers for a couple minutes. They gave me a case number and showed me a footprint in the dust on my front door. They told me the 2 guys I saw were neighbors. The officers knocked on a few doors to see if anyone saw anything. One guy heard a vehicle drive away after my door was kicked in, but they weren't sure if it was related. The officer said it was probably an opportunistic robbery, meaning the robbers probably thought no one was home since the lights were off and my truck was in the garage, instead of the driveway or street like most of my neighbors park. They went outside and talked among themselves. They eventually came back in and told me that a detective would call me in the morning and gave me a case number on a little slip of paper. I typed up everything that happened so I'd have a record and emailed it to some friends so I'd have a timestamp. I notified my boss in case I couldn't make it into work. It turns out, the yelling I heard when I came downstairs was the scout telling the two robbers to get out because he must have seen my bedroom light flick on, which was visible from the front of the house. The people left my house on foot and I never heard a car, so I was unaware that they left when I got up. The next day, I called the contractor to fix the door, called back on Monday, but said he can come out and fix my door but not for another 3 weeks. I pushed a sofa against my door, then went to Home Depot to get some stuff to jury rig it closed. I ordered a door armor kit from Amazon, bought some wood glue, drywall repair kit, and matching paint to do the repairs myself. Later that week, I was installing the door armor kit after work and gluing the wood back in place while carrying a pistol. I discovered the door frame had more damage that was glued together by someone else. One of my neighbors, the ones mentioned earlier, and his wife came by while I was working on the front door. The husband and his wife told me what they had seen. I got a monitored alarm system installed, along with armor kits for all the exterior doors. I replaced my back door, which was mostly a big glass window with a steel door. 2 months later, I heard a loud bang at the front door, followed by silence. The next morning, I noticed a dirty boot print on my front door. I was glad to see that the door armor kit worked. This has actually happened 3 times since. I was able to look up my case by case number on the police department website. A detective was assigned, but there was no other information. 3 years later, I'm still waiting for the detective that has never called me back. According to the police department website, there's no cases matching the case number I have. I believe I still have some residual PTSD from the incident. When I was 10, I was sleeping over at my friend's house, who I will refer to as H. We grew up in a small town in southern Kentucky, where most people knew each other on a first-name basis. H and I had been best friends since kindergarten, so we would often hang out and have sleepovers on the weekends. It was a cool fall night in November when we were playing Xbox in his basement. At around 11 p.m., I got hungry and told H I was going to run upstairs and grab a snack from the kitchen. His parents were asleep, so all the upstairs lights in the house were off. The moonlight provided just enough visibility for me to grab a bag of Cool Ranch Doritos out of the cabinet. As I turned around to head back down, I thought I heard a faint thump coming from the sliding door facing the backyard. It caught me off guard and made me jump. I froze for a second, trying to listen for the noise again, wondering if it was just my imagination. I didn't hear anything after standing there for a few more seconds, so I headed back down to H, who had his headset on while playing Call of Duty. I told him how I thought I heard a noise upstairs, but he didn't really seem too concerned and chalked it up to it just being an animal or something. We continued to take turns playing after each game for the next half hour. While I was in the middle of a game, H tapped my shoulder and told me to take the headset off. He pointed towards a window that was cracked open and whispered for me to listen. I slowed my breath, trying to be quiet as possible. All of a sudden, we both looked at each other, realizing that there were footsteps coming from outside. So he crept up the stairs to wake up his parents and tell them what was going on. As we opened the door at the top of the steps, we looked towards the sliding glass door and saw a large person dressed in black peering in through the window. Not wanting to be seen, we ran back down and turned off the Xbox and TV, making the room pitch black. We sat on the floor just out of view from the window, listening as we heard footsteps walking around the backyard. Maybe 5 minutes passed and it grew quiet, and we started to wonder if they left. Just as we got our hopes up, we heard a loud shattering sound come from the upstairs in the kitchen. We both freaked out and hid in the small closet-sized room behind the furnace. It sounded like there were at least 2 sets of footsteps as the wooden floorboards creaked above us as we stayed hidden. A few minutes later, we heard the basement door open and listened as they slowly walked downstairs and flipped on the lights. I was shaking uncontrollably and definitely felt the most scared I've ever been in my entire life. I could hear them rustling around with bags as I heard them grabbing stuff and dropping it in. A couple minutes went by until we heard them talking right outside the door. I wanted to scream, but knew they'd find us if I did, so I held my breath with my hand over my mouth. A few seconds of silence passed until the door to the furnace room swung open and one of the men stepped in. I closed my eyes and buried my head between my knees, horrified of what was about to happen if they saw us. I'm not sure how, but the man didn't notice me or H curled up behind the furnace, and he closed the door. A huge sense of relief filled us as they started walking back up the stairs, but we were still too scared to move. At this point, H was crying and kept saying that he needed to get his mom and dad, but I convinced him to stay hidden until we knew they were gone. The only problem was that we had no way of knowing if they were still there or not, so we stayed hidden in the furnace room the entire night. It was the longest night of our lives. Once the sun started to rise, we eventually worked up the courage to open the door and make our way upstairs. They were definitely gone, but the entire first floor was completely ransacked. H and I ran up to his parents' room and woke them up, crying and relieved to see them. We told them what happened, and his dad instantly got up and grabbed his shotgun and made us wait in their room with his mom while he checked the house and called the police. The robbers were gone, but they stole a lot of electronics including H's Xbox, his mom's purse, and a bunch of other valuable items. The police showed up and searched for any fingerprints, but didn't come up with anything. It was the first break-in in the city over the past 5 years, so it ended up becoming quite a big deal in town. We've told this story to just about everyone we know, and it still remains a mystery as to who the people were to this day. It was around noon on a Thursday when I was home alone. I was waiting for my husband to get off for his lunch break to come pick me up for his lunch together. I was wasting time waiting for him while I was watching Netflix until I heard a knock at the front door. I got up to go check it out. I could see through the curtained door frame windows on each side of the door that it was some teenage kid. I didn't know who he was, and I knew he wasn't looking for my husband either. He had this little dog following him too. As soon as I got to the door, before I even opened it, he had already walked off the porch and was leaving. I figured, well, there's no point opening the door, he's already moved on. My first thought was that the kid found the dog and he was going door to door looking for its owner or something. I walked back to the back room and returned to my show, only to hear some shuffling outside the window. This definitely got my interest. There are no doors back there, and it's far enough off the street that nobody should ever be heard from this distance. I peeked out the window and saw it was the same boy, climbing up onto the fence and peeking into this old door that led to a little porch. It was never used, and the door leading to the house had been nailed shut and a bookcase was put in front of it. I started to panic a little here. The kid was definitely up to no good. There is no access to the outside from that little cubby. It's all screened in and only accessible from the inside. He was trying to get into that hideaway door, and didn't knock either. I started trying to call my husband, and I could hear the kid walk around front to knock at the front door again. He was checking a second time to make sure nobody is home. There was no answer from my husband. Shoot, what do I do? Oh yeah, duh, call 911. I started dialing it, and I could hear him struggling to climb up the fence and rip open the screen to get inside the cubby door room. I got a 911 operator on the line. I moved a dresser in front of the door to the room I was in. I told them my name, location, and that there is a burglary in progress at my house. The kid started kicking at the nailed shut door with the bookcase in front of it, and he was kicking hard. He was trying to break it down. The 911 operator could hear him hammering away in the background as I tried to barely speak above a whisper, hoping he wouldn't hear me. Then I heard a loud crack, realizing to myself that he was inside now. I was shaking like a leaf. I had no weapons and no means to protect myself. If this guy heard me on the phone talking to 911, the only thing between me and him is a single door and a not very heavy dresser pushed in front of it, and that wasn't going to be much protection considering what I just heard him doing. That's when I heard police sirens. Living in a small town where all the cops have known you personally on a first-name basis since you were like 8 has its advantages. It didn't hurt either that my mom was a cop at the time. They caught the guy in the act, trying to climb back out of the hole he ripped in the screen, claiming he wasn't doing anything, even though his pants were torn from when he slipped on the fence trying to gain a foothold inside to begin with. The cops came in, and I unbarricaded the door and we went to see the damages. The kid failed to get the nailed shut door open, even though he wailed on it with all he had, so he turned to the wall next to it. The kid put his foot through the actual wall of the house into the bathroom to try to break in. That's what that loud crack was, a new person-sized hole being put through the wall. I wrote up my statement, and the kid was taken away in the back of the cruiser. I found out later that he was skipping school specifically to break into houses, and had already robbed and gone to juvie for 3 other burglaries. He tended to go for video games, computers, and stuff like that. Of course, since he was still technically a minor, they let him off with yet another slap on the wrist and no real punishment. We moved out of there and into some apartments not too long after that happened. I'm just glad the police showed up when they did.